I know that we are entering into Shabbat with today's news weighing on us, on our hearts, and we might feel very tender and raw. We might feel any number of things right now. And I want to remind all of us that whatever we're feeling and wherever we're coming from, geographically, emotionally, spiritually, Jewishly, everything we bring tonight is so important and really is crucial to what we will create together in community. And being present tonight for ourselves enables us to be present for each other, and being present for each other enables us to be present and open to receive our tradition and to let it comfort us and strengthen us and inspire us. So in order to become more present within ourselves, let's take another deep breath and just give a moment to really notice and to honor how you are feeling in body and heart and mind. If you'd like to turn inward by closing your eyes, I welcome you to do that. And I also invite you to roll your shoulders back and create some beautiful expansiveness and spaciousness in your body in whatever way is comfortable for you, so that that can be reflected in some expansiveness of spirit through which we can be open to receive. We can have a broad, expansive perspective. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, about perspective. So, welcome to those who are just joining. We're just taking some beautiful centering breaths and noticing what we're bringing into this space of community and Shabbat tonight. And when we're present for that, we can be more present for each other and for the wisdom of our tradition that we will allow to inspire us, to comfort us, to give us strength this evening. I wanted to ask if anyone has a moment of joy, something that you have celebrated recently or will be celebrating. Doesn't need to be a big official simcha, but something that is a spark of joy. I'd like to harvest up some sparks of joy before we light our candles. So does anyone have anything that you'd like to share? Tracy, go ahead and unmute and share with us, please. You're not able to unmute? Okay. If you're able, you can type it into the chat if that's possible for you. Anyone else?
Oh, my daughter just turned 40 years old.
Mazel tov, Tracy. I call that's called a mama-versary, when a parent when a mother has a child have a birthday. That's your mama-versary. So happy mama-versary, happy birthday to your daughter. Mazel tov. Anyone else? Yeah, Diane, go ahead.
You do not have it set. I just was wondering. Usually you're the first one.
Oh, Elena, great to see you, and Eva and Jean, great to see you. Diane, what spark of joy would you like to share with us? Oh, please mute, Diane. Please unmute. Sorry.
My daughter Rose is coming to Massachusetts at the end of July. So
wonderful.
Happy. Haven't seen her for a couple of years, except on Zoom.
Oh, so happy for you and Michael. That's
yes.
A spark of joy to anticipate. Beautiful. Let's harvest a few more sparks. Larry.
Denise and I celebrated our 19th wedding anniversary this past Wednesday. We were married 19 years ago in
Mazel
Ohabei
tov.
Shalom in the chapel.
Mazel tov. That's wonderful. Mazel tov, Larry and Denise. L'chaim. Oops. Anyone else? Ruth, did you want to say something? Okay. Elena?
Okay, I'm back.
Ah, she's stateside. Are you in the same time zone?
Yes, on the Eastern time. I'm now in
Welcome back.
Philadelphia. Mhm.
Welcome back.
Yes, thank you.
We're glad you don't have to join us at midnight anymore.
Yes, yes. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom and Mazel Tov. I know that Elena has a new position.
Yes,
Mazel Tov on that.
thank you.
Wonderful.
Hello, everybody. Mhm.
Did we miss anybody who'd like to share a simcha, a spark of joy? I will share that my 3 boys had their last day of school today, and I can't believe how old they are. Gavi just completed 10th grade, and Ami completed 7th grade, and Idan completed 2nd grade. And so lots of emotions. So proud of them. So that's my spark. All right. Well, we're going to light candles and bring in that physical spark, that physical light. I wondered if anyone who is here on the Zoom has candles out that you would like to share with us and have those be the candles that we light on behalf of everyone. I do see Deborah with a box of matches. Thank you, Deborah and Brian. So we're going to all look at Deborah and Brian's candles as we bring in Shabbat. I'm going to sing the blessing. It's on page 2, and our tech support tonight, who's my wonderful assistant Daria, will be sharing. She's just shared the link to our digital prayer book if you would like that. But let's bring in that light together and really set an intention to bring that light into ourselves, to cultivate expansiveness, spaciousness, an expansive perspective during a difficult time. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. I want to share a few words from Rabbi Yael Levy, whose work inspires the Thursday morning offering that some of us have been sharing and all are welcome to. She's a rabbi, meditation teacher, and on this parashah, she brings this perspective. She speaks about stepping forward in new ways, seeing with new eyes, moments of spaciousness. When our perspective expands, it is possible to see that much of the fear and doubt are only stories that the mind has conjured. How to return to a spacious perspective, how to discern illusion and truth. The call from the mystery rings like a bell. Practice, do mitzvot, engage in acts of connection. I share these words in the hope that this Shabbat will provide the spiritual nourishment, the rest that our hearts, minds, and bodies need to replenish us for the work ahead. Rabbi Levy continues when asking, how can we have a more expansive perspective when times are dark and difficult, give thanks, acknowledge beauty, respond with compassion, offer help, seek guidance, listen well, engage with ritual, do acts of justice, speak words of blessing. Engaging in these actions will help expand our perspectives and deepen our discernment so that we can better see what is most true. May this Shabbat connect us better to each other and to all of those things that Rabbi Levi listed to replenish us for the work ahead. We're going to continue with Shalom Aleichem, welcoming the angels of peace of Shabbat and reminding us that we have more power than we think. We can hurt or heal with our words and our actions. The forces that threaten us, they're not bigger than we are. We are so powerful when we set our intention. Shalom Aleichem, page 24. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzeidchem leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We'll turn now to a bit of the end of Psalm 29, which is on page 18 and 19 in our book, but we're going to sing the last two lines on page 19. This is a melody that we learned from Nava Tehila, who joined us back in early May. And the words mean, may Adonai grant strength to God's people. May Adonai bless God's people with peace. The word for strength is oz, and I invite you just to focus in on that word, oz, strength. Adonai oz, le'amo yiten, Adonai yevarech et amo. Adonai oz, le'amo yiten, Adonai yevarech et amo. Shalom. Shalom. Adonai oz, le'amo yiten, Adonai yevarech et amo. Adonai oz, לעמו ייתן אדוני יברך את עמו. ושלום. Shalom. Turning to the next page. In the prayer book, page 20 and 21, Lecha Dodi, we greet Shabbat together. We enter into sacred time in community. We invite one another to remember that there is something sacred for us to invite in. Sometimes it can be so hard to remember that on our own. We need each other. We're not all in the same emotional place at the same time, so we reach out a hand in need or in service and in help towards one another, and together we greet what is sacred, the presence of peace and holiness. And here, in this case, we greet and enter into Shabbat. We'll sing verses 1, 2, 5, and 9. On 9, you can rise in body or spirit as you wish. We'll rise and face the entry to our homes or wherever we are to symbolically welcome by bowing Shabbat, peace. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, השמיענו אל המיוחד, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ולתפארת ולתהילה. לך דודי, לך דודי לקראת סקלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת סקלה, פני שבת נקבלה. שם לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי מקור הברכה מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי, לך דודי לקראת סקלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת סקלה, פני שבת נקבלה. Verse 5. התעוררי, התעוררי, כי באורך קומי אורי, אורי אורי, שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. לך דודי, לך דודי לקראת סקלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת סקלה, פני שבת נקבלה. בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לך דודי, לך דודי לקראת קהלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קהלה, פני שבת נקבלה. going to transition into the Ma'ariv with Baruch Hu. This time, because we're on Zoom only, and I want us to feel as connected as possible, if you would like to unmute for the responsive line of Baruch Hu and have a cacophonous response from across the miles, we are invited to do that if you wish. You don't have to. Hopefully, I think you're all able to do that, to unmute, and then just be sure to mute afterwards. And please rise in body or spirit, page 28. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Vad. So, of course, we've just passed the summer solstice. So, yes, light is technically decreasing little by little, but there is so much light right now. So, with that in mind, we give thanks for the cycles of light and dark without which our world could not exist. Page 30, a few lines up from the bottom in the Hebrew. Uma'avir yom umevi laila, umavdil ben yom uven laila, Adonai tzvaot shemo, el chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu, leolam va'ed, baruch ata Adonai, Ha'mariv Aravim. For the next blessing before the Shema, we turn to page 32, and we connect with the feeling of being loved deeply and eternally. And despite all of the challenges of the historical moment and of all of the historical moments of our people, this gift of wisdom, of sacred values to root us, to guide our lives, has been with us for millennia. We give thanks for that in this blessing. Ahavat olam Beit Yisrael Amcha ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot Chukim u'mishpatim Otanu limadeta. Al ken Adonai Eloheinu b'shochveinu u'v'kumeinu nasiach b'chukecha v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha u'v'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed. Ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu ve'orech yameinu uvahem nege yomam v'layla ואהבת חר תסיר ממנו לעולמים ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. Page 36. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בעם, בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם. Amen. Page 40. The sea that we need to cross can seem so vast. It can seem absolutely impossible that we will cross over it. But perhaps we can connect with the possibilities again of open mind and open heart, expansive perception, perhaps just beyond what we're able to see, perhaps beyond what seems possible or probable. There's hope for a sea to part and for us to cross through together. Again, to evoke the image I gave you earlier, each of us reaching out with a hand that can offer help or a hand that needs help. We can't make this crossing alone. We cross together, and that's what makes the impossible possible. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות, עושי פלא, נורא תהילות, עושי פלא, מלכותך ראו בניך, בוקי הים לפני משה ומרים, זה לי ענו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. We'll turn to page 42 for our lying down blessing. When we feel vulnerable, we remember the feeling of being sheltered in peace. If we can connect with that sense of security and certainty in a very uncertain world, then that's a gift to give to ourselves and to others. So Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu, let us lie down. Let us let go and close our eyes so that we can wake up to a new day and use our eyes and our ears and our hands and everything that we have at our disposal to work with you, God. to bring more peace, more justice, more compassion, more healing. But first we rest. Rest is built into the very fabric of creation, according to our tradition. And when we rest at night, it's a vulnerable time. It's a time when fears can mount, even in our modern, brightly lit era. So we sing with the intention, the motivation that we lie down this evening and wake up replenished and refreshed for the work ahead. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom vehamidenu shomreinu lechaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom vehamidenu shomreinu lechaim. Now we imagine that sukkah of peace, a sukkah of God's peace, Sukkot Shlomecha, embracing us, embracing all of us, embracing our entire world. Perhaps that sukkah, that shelter, can enable us to feel peace because it brings us close to others. It helps us remember that we are not alone. We sing 3 lines down from the top. Ufros aleinu sukat, sukat shelomecha. Ufros aleinu sukat, sukat shelomecha. Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. We'll have the opportunity for the Amidah, the central prayer, the standing prayer. I know that not everyone has the book or is comfortable with the digital prayer book, so please take this time as a time of individual or private prayer in whatever way would be meaningful for you. We can turn off our cameras if they're on and we want to go inward in that way. We'll join back together after a few quiet moments with a prayer for peace on page 60, Shalom Rav. I'm going to begin with the first 3 blessings, though, aloud before we go individually quiet. Please rise in body or spirit. Adonai, sefatai tiftach, ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Page 48. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel ve'Elohei Leah. האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו ביהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם, בעזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה כל אתריו להושיע, מוריד הטל, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיה הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. We continue some prayers on our own. We'll join back together in a couple of moments. As we're ready, we join back together with a prayer for peace. Shalom Rav, great peace, al Israel Amcha, upon your people Israel. Tasim le'olam, place upon us forever. Page 60. Shalom Rav, al Israel Amcha, tasim le'olam. Shalom Rav, al Israel Amcha, tasim le'olam. Ki ata hu melech adon, lechol hashalom. Ki ata hu melech adon, lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav, al Israel Amcha, tasim le'olam. Shalom Rav, al Israel Amcha, tasim le'olam. וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל, בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שלום רב על ישראל עמך, תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך, תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם. At this time, we can pray for those who are in need of healing of body or spirit. And we're a small enough group here on the Zoom that if you wish to mention people aloud, you can unmute, or you can raise your hand and I'll call on you to unmute, or you can simply put names in the chat. Go ahead, Larry. Oh, Larry, I'm sorry, you were still muted. Okay, we'll go to someone else for now. I see Esther Yanow, Bernard Gray. I'd like to mention Julia Berkman, Esther Neshama, Leah Bat Kayla. Anyone else? Ken Waller, Liesel, Marcia, Alan, Susan. And I'm just going to share some names from our community as well. At times like this, it's been this way in various degrees for so long, but I know there's so many groups of people that we're thinking of who are suffering and are in need of healing in so many ways for so many different reasons in our nation and around the world. It's hard to hold them all close, and it's much easier to think of individuals and to conjure people's faces, but we can use this prayer also as a time to think about communal healing as well. All those who are in danger in Ukraine, those who have fled Ukraine, those who are suffering from the after effects of the many, many mass shootings in our country, those who are suffering as a result of the Supreme Court decision today. We hold so many people in our hearts. As we consider for whom we are praying tonight, I'm going to share names from our community. Amanda Firestein, Eliezer Ben Chana, Leah Bat Kayla, Esther Neshama, Esther Tzvia Bat Asher V'Nechama, Karen Weber, Judy Shepro, Yisrael Beryl Ben Gela Rachel V'Label Yankel, Naomi Bat Zipporah V'Yosef, Naomi Fisher, Chaim Mesh, Dalia Bat Miriam, Chaya Blima Bat Chaim Chia Vasilia Rochel, Cassandra Warshawski, Jeffrey Colt, Yosef Ben Herschel Verut, Joseph Siegel, and Glenna Bub. The Misha Berach prayer we'll be singing on the middle of page 253. Misha Berach Avotenu Mekor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misha Berach Imotenu Mekor habracha Lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. And Karen, since you just joined, I want to mention that we mentioned your name. We're thinking of you for healing. May you know refuah shlema. I'm going to just share a few words now. So as I shared earlier in the service at a couple of points, and some of you may not have been here yet, we're coming into this Shabbat with perhaps raw and tender in a way that, despite all the things that we have to be feeling frightened or concerned about in our world for so long now, this may feel different. The news from today cuts very deep for us as people, as individuals, and as community, and as people who hold fast to the preciousness and sanctity of human life, and that those who are already born and living must be protected and kept from harm, emotional harm, physical harm. And the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade, I think, cuts deep for many, many of us as Jews. And so I want to name that I think we're experiencing this, many of us entering into Shabbat with perhaps various emotions that may be strong. We may be feeling despair, lack of hope, overwhelmed by the forces that threaten us and our values that seem to be so strong these days. So I was thinking about how the news from today could possibly connect to the Torah portion of this week, which is Shlach. This is the scene in the book of Numbers when God tells Moses to send a representative from each of the 12 tribes to go and scout out the land of Canaan that God has already promised them, has promised the Israelites. To see, and I'll paraphrase from the Torah portion, to see if the land is good or bad, fertile or lean, are the people living there strong or weak, few or numerous, are the cities open or fortified. So it was a grape season, and the scouts went to the Valley of the Grapes. They cut down a cluster of grapes, and they gathered up pomegranates and figs, beautiful produce from this land. And they spent 40 days there. And they came back, and they showed Moses and his brother Aaron and the whole community the fruit of the land. And they said, well, at least 10 of them said, we came into the land, and yeah, it's pretty great. It's flowing with milk and honey. But the people that dwell in the land are too strong, and the cities are greatly fortified. The cities are fortified. We can't possibly get past those walls. And it was Caleb who spoke up and hushed the people and said, no, we can. We can, while everyone else is saying we can't possibly overcome these obstacles, Caleb says, actually we can. We can take possession of the land. We're able to do this. But those with him, except for Joshua, said, we can't go against these people. They say that the people looked like giants, and that they themselves must have looked like grasshoppers in the eyes of the residents of the land. Interestingly, they don't say, we were as tiny as grasshoppers. They said, we must have looked as tiny as grasshoppers to them. So then the text tells us that Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the Israelites, and Joshua, Yehoshua bin Nun, and Caleb, both of them, the two who thought differently, the minority opinion, tore their garments in mourning. And they said, wait a second, guys. The land we just explored was good land. Remember that awesome produce? It was good. We have to have faith. God said, I'm giving you this land. It can't possibly be impossible. We can't give in to the sense of impossibility, no matter how impossible it seems. God is with us. We can't fear. But the people found it apparently easier to side with those who said, we can't. We're tired. We've been wandering a really long time, right? We're just ready to drop from exhaustion. Wouldn't it be better to just go back to Egypt even at this point? If we're facing scary things ahead of us, let's just go back to those familiar scary things behind us, even a generation behind us. So Moses, not for the first time, not for the last time, intercedes on behalf of the people when God gets really, really angry. God is angry at the people's lack of faith. I told you I was giving you this land. I performed all these signs and wonders for you in Egypt. Weren't you there? You witnessed it. You witnessed the goodness. You witnessed the impossible. The sea was parted. The plagues came down. You were freed. So how can you believe about yourself that you are not powerful enough to go into the promised land? So Moses says, God, remember, you told me back in the book of Exodus, well, he didn't say that part. You told me that you are, and I reminded you, I reminded you, God, back then, that you're slow to anger, you're abundant in kindness, you're a forgiver, and you need to forgive these people. You forgave them these other times. There'll be other times you'll need to forgive them as well, but remember, you're a God who forgives. And God kind of makes a compromise and says, well, all those who saw all the miracles, all of the possible in circumstances that seemed impossible, and still didn't have faith that they were going to be able to overcome the obstacles ahead of them, that enslaved generation, that generation that were slaves and now has wandered for so many years and they have lost perspective, they have lost their faith. They're not going to be able to enter the land. But Caleb and Joshua, the dissenters, those who saw it from perhaps a more expansive perspective, a different perspective somehow, they're going to be able to come into the land, and it is they and their offspring who will inherit this land. And the others, the others will wander about in this desert for 40 years, 1 year for every day the scouts were exploring. So there we had the 40 years, and the scouts who had spread the word about the land being impossible to conquer died suddenly, and only Joshua and Caleb of those 12 survived. So in the face of insurmountable obstacles, whatever it is for us today, right now, we can think of several things that feel like fortified cities and giants that are so overpowering. What allowed Joshua and Caleb to see things differently? What allowed Joshua and Caleb to have a different perspective? Was it that they just felt like much more strong and confident? Had they been working out more and they felt like they could be more physically powerful than anyone else? Or is it that they were able to hold on to their sense of personal power, and through that sense of personal agency and holding tight to it, that was their form of continuing to have faith in a God that would enable them to come into the land? It's easy for us to forget the sense of our own power in the face of systemic forces that threaten us physically, threaten us in terms of our values that we hold so sacred. So something like the decision of today that seems so enormous, because after all, it was decades It was decades in the making, this decision today. Many, many forces had to come into play, and many people worked hard for those forces to align so that this legislation, this constitutional right that allows us to value life in the way we are commanded, would be overturned. How do we take the long view and remember that though it may take a very long time, we need to be in this work, and our power needs to be in remembering that we are here to do the work even if we do not see the fruits of our labor. So I just am wondering about that sense of perspective, and I shared with you earlier the words of Rabbi Yael Levi, and I want to remind you of a few of them because in her poetic, mindfulness-based interpretation of this Torah portion, she talks all about expansiveness and perspective as opposed to the narrow view. And remember that Egypt in Hebrew is Mitzrayim, which comes from the root narrow, and so we often say it's the narrow place. So maybe that slavery and that time and that place represents the narrow view, and what we're moving toward and what the generation that could enter the land had and could continue to cultivate was an expansive view that against all odds, that against what seems impossible, they could make the impossible possible. So Rabbi Levi says that when our perspective expands, it's possible to see that much of the fear and doubt are only stories that come from our mind. How can we return to a spacious perspective, she asks? How can we discern illusion and truth? And she says, what are those things that we must do? What does God require of us? Give thanks, acknowledge beauty, respond with compassion, offer help, seek guidance, listen well, engage with ritual, do acts of justice, speak words of blessing. She writes, engaging in these actions will help expand our perspectives and deepen our discernment so that we can better see what is most true. So perhaps if we keep at it, if we keep at the work, at these practices, speaking words of blessing, engaging with ritual and community, responding with compassion to one another, perhaps when we do those things, we can have and cultivate the perspective of Caleb and of Joshua, and we can see what is most true. As Jews, we are inheritors of a tradition that really understands that there's so much more than what we can see and so much more than what we can understand. And the great gift of Torah, of the wisdom to live our lives and all of the values and practices embedded in it, is that no matter what circumstances we find ourselves in, we can keep doing those, what seem to us in our small-mindedness sometimes, small things. But each small thing and another, each hand reaching out to another to receive help or to give help, every one of them becomes something so much stronger than any fortified city or any seemingly giant person trying to take away our rights and trying to harm us. Our goal is to continue to believe that what appears true is not necessarily true, is not necessarily truth. That what appears impossible is not necessarily impossible. My friend and colleague, Rabbi Anna Boswell Levy, wrote today, faith is not the same as hope. Faith is admitting that there are larger forces at work that we don't see, that we don't understand. Faith is admitting that while we cannot control individual outcomes, we are part of something larger and more mysterious. Faith is in the knowledge that though our lives are finite and fleeting, our capacity to do good in the world is tremendous in ways we can never fully know or appreciate. Just as the takedown of Roe v. Wade was decades in the making, so too our words and actions, even now, have impact and power that will resonate for generations. If we forget that, we're stuck in the narrow view. We are human, so we're all going to forget that. Caleb and Joshua, one can imagine that in those 40 days they spent in the land of Israel, they may have had their moments of deep doubt. No one of us is going to stay in that place of faith that God requires of us. But my hope is, and my blessing for all of us and my prayer, is that in this extremely difficult time for our nation, and of course for our world, that we will continue to remember that we're not walking this path alone. We're not alone in the wilderness. We're not alone when we get to the entrance eventually of a promised land that may seem impossible to enter into. We can hold out our hands for help, to receive it or to give it. We can have more power than we know, and we can make the impossible possible. So it's 7 o'clock. I meant to make this a short service. I feel like people have things on their mind and you may want to share any reflection or a word or two. So we're going to move to conclude our service, and then I really do want to invite any of you to stay on for a few moments if you need, just to be heard or to hear somebody else, to support one another, to remind each other that we are hands and hearts that are together in this. And we're going to move toward concluding our service with Aleinu on page 282, which is interesting to think about because Aleinu means it's up to us. We're responsible. It's really a reminder of responsibility. So we say in this prayer, it's upon us to praise God, but certainly a way of praising God is to connect with the godly values that have been handed down to us: the sanctity of life, compassion and justice, and faith. So we remind ourselves of that responsibility. Page 282, we rise in body or spirit. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר ארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינת עוזו בגופי מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. Page 287. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. We can be seated, and I'd like to ask if anyone is observing a yard site this Shabbat or is in a time of mourning and would like to mention a name for Mourner's Kaddish. You can also place names in the chat, and here we have our list of those from our community who have died at this season in times past. Is anyone observing a yard site? You can raise your hand or place it in the chat. Martha Rosenblatt, Mildred Mayeri. I'm remembering my dad, Gerald Marcus, on his 24th yahrzeit. We rise for Mourner's Kaddish, page 294. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, B'alma divra chirutei v'amlich malchutei, B'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chaye d'chol Beit Yisrael, B'agala u'v'zman kori v'imru Amen. Yehe shmei Rabbah mevorach le'alam u'lalmei almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shmei d'kudusha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechemata, damiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehe shlama Rabbah min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav v'yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. This time, sorry, technical difficulty here. And I apologize if I read names that were there for Misha Berach. It is not clear from the way that my screen is. So for anyone who mentioned those names and they were meant for healing, I so apologize if that's the case. Sometimes it's hard to tell on the Zoom. If they are in need of healing, may they have a refuah shlema. So tomorrow morning we will not be meeting. We're going to have a little bit of a different summer schedule for a variety of reasons, but we have so much going on for you starting later in July and in August and beyond that we will more than make it up to you. So we don't have services tomorrow. Next Friday we'll be again on Zoom. As some of you know, we're dealing with the impact of a very significant flood in our offices. And we're needing to use the chapel space in some other ways for the time being. We will be back there. Our first service back there will be July 22nd, when our new assistant rabbi, Rabbi Jennifer Queen, and I will, God willing, lead our first service together in the chapel, and also, of course, offered virtually. So please save the date for that. And just check your newsletter. We have all kinds of services in different formats coming up, and then a lot of different opportunities for connection as a community in the coming months. Okay, we're going to have the opportunity for Kiddush and Motzi, and then again, I know that some people are tuning in via Facebook. Of course, feel free to reach out to me, anyone out there, by email, to share any thoughts you'd like to share on anything that I spoke about tonight. That's an open invitation. I hope I don't regret it. But and then for those of you here on Zoom, we can share thoughts or simply a hello and greet each other and wish each other Shabbat Shalom. Kiddush and Motzi, if you have challah or a delicious bread of some other kind, wine or juice, and would like to join in, please do. And we traditionally rise for Kiddush and Motzi, which are on page 5. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho b'yahava uvratzon yinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh v'reshit, ki hu yom techila lemikra'e kodesh, זכר ליציאת מצרים, כי בנו בחרת, ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, ושבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, המוציא לחם מן הארץ. Amen. Coco and Hershey, my dogs, are delighted that I'm at home leading services tonight, so they get double the challah. So we're going to end tonight with hopefully a very inspiring song. We're going to share the video and audio of We Rise by Batya Levine. We're cycling through with We Rise again. Many of you have heard it before, and if you haven't, you're in for an inspiring treat, I hope. And we'll share the video with you, and then please feel free. Those on the Zoom will stop the live stream, and then those on the Zoom can greet one another.
We rise, humbly hearted rise, won't be divided, rise, with spirit to guide us, rise, in hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here, in a hope, in prayer, we're right here, in a hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here, in hope, in prayer, we're right here, and we rise, all of the children rise, elders with wisdom rise, ancestors surround us, rise, in hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here, in a hope, in prayer, we're right here, in a hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here, in hope, in prayer, we're right here, and we rise, up from the wreckage, rise, with tears and with courage, rise, fighting for life, we rise, in hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here, in hope, in prayer, we're right here, in hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here, in hope, in prayer, we're right here, and we rise, humbly hearted rise, won't be divided, rise, with spirit to guide us, rise.
I hope that gave you some spiritual nourishment and strength and inspiration. Thank you so